Buried deep beneath Europe's forests and mountains lie bunkers the Nazis never wanted the world to find. These weren't just military shelters, they were stages for twisted experiments, occult rituals, and projects so horrifying they were erased from history. What happened inside these sealed chambers? And why do whispers of chanting, shadows, and strange energy still linger decades later? These are the 5 Nazi bunkers so haunted, they were sealed forever. What you're about to see isn't in your history books. Nestled deep within the fog-wrapped Bavarian Alps, surrounded by thick pine forests and jagged cliffs, Bunker 7 remained a myth for decades. Whispers of its existence passed through old German villages and conspiracy forums alike, rumors of a vast underground labyrinth that once served as a contingency refuge for Adolf Hitler himself. Though the Allies dismantled many known Nazi strongholds after the war, Bunker 7 evaded detection. It wasn't until the summer of 1997, when 2 amateur hikers from Munich veered off trail during a sudden rainstorm, that the steel-plated entrance was discovered, half buried in moss and debris. The structure was massive, its entryway concealed beneath a rockslide and layers of overgrowth. Local authorities were alerted, and within weeks, a joint archaeological and military inspection was underway. What they found shocked even the most seasoned historians. Unlike typical bunkers, which focused on practicality and speed of construction, Bunker 7 was built with intricate design and remarkable permanence. The outer walls, nearly 2 meters thick, were reinforced with a lead lining, possibly for radiation shielding. Blueprints recovered from nearby archives later revealed the codename, Project Morgenlicht, or Project Morning Light. The interior stretched down 4 levels, each more bizarre than the last. The first 2 levels were standard military layouts, storage for weapons, supplies, and communication equipment. Yet even here, oddities began to emerge. Most of the radios had been modified to emit ultra-low frequencies, and several rooms were lined with copper coils. On one wall, an inscription was found in Gothic script, Nur im Dunkel erkennt man das Licht. Only in darkness can one recognize the light. The 3rd level marked a shift in purpose. This was no longer a command center, but rather a museum of madness. Dozens of glass cases lined the corridors, containing what appeared to be religious relics, ancient texts, and objects of occult significance. One case held what resembled a mummified hand, wrapped in ceremonial red thread and labeled in Latin. Another displayed a pentagram etched into a mirror, its surface forever smudged by black ash. A room deeper in the level held ritual robes, swastikas sewn in gold thread, and stone altars with dried bloodstains still visible under UV light. It was here investigators began to piece together the horrifying secondary function of Bunker 7, a temple of Nazi occultism. An old film projector was discovered in a chamber marked Kammer für Bewusstseinserweiterung, Chamber for Consciousness Expansion. Several reels were found alongside it, labeled with cryptic terms like Theta Session I and Dream Mirror 12. One film, preserved remarkably well, depicted a series of experiments involving sleep deprivation, hypnosis, and sensory overload inflicted on what appeared to be prisoners. Disturbingly, the subjects were shown strapped to chairs while men in SS uniforms conducted sessions in absolute silence. At one point, a child, no older than 10, was led into the frame and made to recite the same phrase repeatedly, Der Geist überlebt, der Körper dient nur. The spirit survives, the body only serves. By the time researchers reached the lowest level, many had already refused to continue. The final descent was down a spiral stairwell, entirely blackened by soot. The air became thick and metallic. This final floor, sealed behind a rusted blast door, contained what could only be described as a sanctuary. Unlike the utilitarian design of the upper levels, the chamber was ornate, almost religious in its architecture. Stone pillars lined the room, each carved with runes unfamiliar to linguists. A massive mural covered the far wall, depicting a black sun rising over a ruined Berlin. In the center of the room stood a throne made from fused steel and bone fragments, whether human or animal remained unconfirmed. Then came the most disturbing find, the Red Book. Bound in cracked leather and hidden inside a sealed compartment behind the throne, the book was over 300 pages long and handwritten entirely in Elder Futhark's script. Historians who studied it noted themes of transhumanism, soul transference, and astral projection. One passage, partially translated, read, "The Reich is but a vessel. In the shadow of defeat, we ascend beyond form, beyond nation, beyond time." While many officials wanted the bunker sealed permanently, a private foundation lobbied to preserve it as a historical site. That effort was quietly denied. Bunker 7 was sealed once more, its coordinates redacted from public records, and the surrounding land declared a restricted military zone. Yet, rumors persist. In 2004, a paranormal investigator claimed to have recorded faint chanting near the sealed entrance. In 2012, a drone lost signal within 3 minutes of flight over the area. In 2019, hikers reported seeing a red light glowing briefly from beneath the rocks during a thunderstorm. Whatever secrets lie within Bunker 7, they remain buried in the silence of the Alps, alongside the ambition of a regime that sought immortality not through power, but through darkness. Beneath the icy cliffs of northern Norway, carved into the unforgiving bedrock of the Arctic Circle, lies a secret long thought to be mere wartime propaganda, the Nordwall complex. First suspected by Norwegian resistance fighters in late 1943, its actual location remained a mystery until thermal imaging in 2012 revealed irregular subterranean structures along a remote coastal fjord. What archaeologists and military experts uncovered would later be classified as one of the most complex and horrifying Nazi installations ever constructed outside of Germany. The Nordwall complex was more than just a bunker. It was a vast underground fortress, an entire world hidden from view, with over 6 miles of tunnels, sealed chambers, and decaying remnants of forgotten atrocities. Built using thousands of Soviet prisoners of war, the construction took place under extreme secrecy and brutality. Survivors of the work camps later spoke of digging day and night with frozen fingers, of hearing screams echoing from deep within the earth, and of guards wearing masks, not to protect themselves from dust, but, they claimed, to keep the spirits from recognizing their faces. The entrance was discovered beneath a rockslide, blocked off with reinforced concrete and sealed using rusted iron bolts and chemical welds. Once inside, the first tunnel sloped downward into complete darkness. Initial survey teams reported severe disorientation, compasses spinning wildly, cameras malfunctioning, and strange echoes reverberating in ways inconsistent with the structure's design. Some believed the complex was constructed over a natural fault line, others that something else, something deliberate, was at work. The first major chamber was a holding area, cells lined with rusted metal doors, each about the size of a walk-in closet. Inside were remnants of bunks, restraints, and crude wall carvings. Nearly every cell had graffiti etched into the concrete, final messages in over a dozen languages, including Russian, Polish, Yiddish, and even Arabic. One chilling carving, written in French, read, "He speaks to us in sleep. We forget our names." Another, in Hungarian, said simply, "Do not answer the knocking." What disturbed the investigators most was the chamber known as Sector R. This section was sealed off with a double steel blast door and was completely airtight. Behind it lay what appeared to be a central command hub, despite there being no clear evidence that Nordwall was ever meant to be accessed again. Maps were pinned to the walls, many marked with strange concentric circles and arrows pointing north, far north, into regions of the Arctic where no settlements or military installations were known to exist. In one corner of the room was a machine resembling a radio tower, though it had no antenna. Instead, long copper wires extended outward from it, woven into the stone walls like roots. The walls of Sector R were lined with a black, chalk-like material that absorbed light. Carved into this were phrases repeated over and over in German, Erwich der Schleiden. Die Welt muss vergessen werden. Awaken through suffering. The world must be forgotten. One wall, behind a makeshift altar of sorts, held the sigil of the Black Sun, an occult emblem associated with SS esoteric beliefs, burned into the stone. The deeper into the labyrinth the teams explored, the more bizarre and disturbing the findings became. One hall, called Der Tunnel der Stimmen by researchers, the Tunnel of Voices, seemed acoustically engineered to amplify the faintest sounds. If one whispered, their voice would echo back seconds later, distorted. Some said they heard whispering even when silent. Psychological evaluations of multiple team members showed rising levels of anxiety, paranoia, and in one case, auditory hallucinations. The team was rotated every 3 days. In the innermost chamber, behind a vault door requiring a 12-digit cipher code found buried in SS archives, was a room simply referred to in Nazi documents as the reflection chamber. Circular, with a domed ceiling coated in a now cracked mirror surface, the room's only contents were a rusted dentist-style chair, leather restraints, and a shattered reel projector. On the wall was scrawled, in flaking black paint, Wahrheit ist Schmerz. Erinnerung ist Tod. Truth is pain. Memory is death. The projector, when repaired and operated, played a looped black and white video featuring no people, only a slowly spinning spiral and a voice repeating a sequence of German words in an increasingly aggressive tone. Translators noted that the voice was speaking commands, suggestions to obey, to forget, to transcend the body. Brainwave scans of viewers who watched the reel for more than 60 seconds began to show abnormal patterns, mirror imaging not consistent with any known sleep or consciousness state. The origins of the Nordwall complex remain unclear. No known Nazi documents explicitly authorize its construction. It does not appear on any Luftwaffe or Wehrmacht blueprints. The theory gaining traction among those who studied it was that Nordwall was a rogue project, perhaps sanctioned by elements within the SS who were dabbling in psionic warfare and psychological weaponry. Equally disturbing were the final discoveries made in what appeared to be a secondary escape route from the complex, a tunnel that led directly to a cliffside facing the Arctic Sea. Along the walls of this narrow passage were skeletons, fused into the stone. Some bore signs of violent trauma. Others were strangely intact, even posed. One body had its hands folded in prayer, its skin preserved by the cold and covered in frost crystals. Tucked into its coat pocket was a letter, sealed in wax. The letter contained a single line, "If this is the new Reich, may God remain buried beneath the ice." Today, the Nordwall complex is under lock and key, monitored by satellite and patrolled twice weekly by Norwegian special forces. It is no longer accessible to the public, and most who have entered refuse to speak of it again. There are no tours, no plaques, no museum exhibits. Only a red X on a classified military map, and the sound of the wind howling through the fjords, like the voices of those who never left the Labyrinth of Shadows. In the quiet, snow-draped Harz Mountains of central Germany, nature conceals a chilling experiment lost to time, an underground facility known only to a few as the audio bunker. For decades, locals whispered about unnatural sounds in the woods, droning hums with no clear source, sudden pressure changes in the air, and the disorienting sensation of being watched. But it wasn't until a group of spelunkers accidentally broke into a sealed ventilation shaft in 1983 that the legend gained substance. What lay beneath the surface wasn't just a forgotten military outpost, it was a failed experiment in weaponized sound. Built in late 1944, the audio bunker was part of a desperate, last-minute effort by Nazi engineers to harness non-lethal warfare technologies. Codenamed Project Clanger, Project Sound Ear, the objective was to use infrasonic and ultrasonic frequencies to disable, disorient, or drive enemies insane. The project was overseen by Dr. Gunther Krantz, a physicist turned SS officer with a deep interest in acoustic resonance and neuromanipulation. The bunker was accessed through a shaft hidden under a man-made pond, sealed shut with lead and iron plates. Once breached, the stench of mold and ozone spilled into the forest air. Teams that later entered the site described a space completely insulated with cork, asbestos, and rubberized foam, a deadening silence that absorbed every footstep. There were no windows, no echoes, only the oppressive quiet of a place built to control every vibration of the air. In the first chamber, investigators found rows of odd devices, large horn-like speakers mounted to the ceiling, each aimed downward toward a steel chair bolted to the floor. Beneath each chair, a thick rubber mat. Beside it, a helmet connected to an ancient analog console with dials labeled in German, Frequenz, Druck, Trauma. Frequency, pressure, trauma. Further exploration revealed recording rooms, lined with reel-to-reel machines and racks of magnetic tape, each labeled with chilling titles: Sitzung 4, Kind Weinen, Sitzung 11, Orgel über Angst, and Sitzung 19, Die Leer Stimme. Session 4, Child Crying. Session 11, Organ Over Fear. Session 19, The Empty Voice. Many tapes were degraded, but several were restored. Audio experts who listened to them reported nausea, cold sweats, and involuntary tremors. Some recordings featured only long periods of low-frequency humming, punctuated by sharp sine waves. Others contained mechanical, synthetic voices repeating words at different intervals. One notorious tape, later dubbed the Spiral Sermon, included what seemed to be an old man reciting a prayer backwards, layered over the sound of distant artillery and someone breathing rapidly. The effect was described by a listener as being pulled inward by nothing. Documents found in a flooded file room revealed that the Nazis had abducted over 200 prisoners from surrounding territories, including resistance fighters, political dissidents, and children from psychiatric hospitals. These individuals were subject to what were termed Klangfeldtests, sound field tests. The files meticulously recorded the results: burst eardrums, seizures, psychotic breaks, and in several cases, what the researchers called Klanginducierter Todzustand, sound-induced death state. Yet many corpses showed no physical trauma at all. One room, designated Echo Chamber A, was entirely spherical, with smooth metal walls and a center pedestal. Here, acoustic resonance reached its peak. According to blueprints, the room was designed to amplify frequencies until they became physically unbearable. Writing scrawled in chalk on the walls suggested the test subjects had been forced to stand inside the chamber, while commands were played at frequencies just below the human hearing threshold. The objective wasn't to kill, but to break the psyche. Among the most disturbing discoveries was found in a locked cabinet near the generator room. Inside were 3 sealed envelopes, each stamped with the Nazi eagle and the initials GHK. One contained a letter written by Dr. Krantz, addressed to Heinrich Himmler. In it, he claimed the experiments had achieved partial consciousness collapse in subjects without physical contact. He described a threshold tone that, when combined with certain spoken phrases, caused subjects to forget language and identity temporarily. He called it Der letzte Ton, the final tone. The second envelope contained blueprints for a mobile version of the weapon, disguised as a transport van equipped with directional sound cannons. Whether these were ever built remains unknown. The third envelope held a list, 43 names, none with nationalities, but all marked as Verloren im Tonfeld, lost in the sound field. Not a single name matched any post-war records. It was as if they had disappeared into air. The final chamber of the audio bunker contained a broken circular turntable surrounded by rotting chairs. Mold climbed the walls, but something else was present. Faint symbols etched into the rust, mathematical spirals, waveforms, and the word Ren carved repeatedly. Listen, listen, listen. In the center, buried under fallen debris, was a box made of copper and wood. Inside was a single audio tape with a red stripe. To this day, the red striped tape has not been released publicly. Rumors suggest it was taken by a NATO acoustic warfare division. A technician who allegedly heard it described the experience as, like drowning, but you're still breathing. Others claim it contains a composite tone, a mix of frequencies that, when played, cause the brain to enter a form of paralysis, as if consciousness is trapped between waking and sleep. Since the rediscovery of the bunker, several anomalies have been reported. Locals claim their radios still pick up strange signals when driving near the forest, despite no towers being nearby. Dogs refuse to go near the hill under which the facility lies. And every winter solstice, several villagers have claimed to hear humming, deep, low, and steady, resonating from the ground like a pulse. Today, the audio bunker is sealed again. Concrete and steel were poured into its entrance, sensors placed above ground to detect movement. Officially, it does not exist. There is no plaque, no marker, only silence. But the tapes, those that survived, have been archived under lock and key by private institutions and military research groups. And the question remains, did the Nazis discover something more than just sound? A frequency so powerful it could tear at the fabric of the mind? Perhaps the most terrifying possibility is not that these sounds killed people, but that they changed them. that somewhere, under layers of static and forgotten screams, the final tone still waits, echoing forever in the dark. Standing stoic on a hill in North Rhine-Westphalia, Wewelsburg Castle has long been infamous as the spiritual heart of Heinrich Himmler's SS cult. A site drenched in myth and madness, the castle's well-known history as a ceremonial headquarters barely scratches the surface. Beneath its ancient stone walls, hidden under layers of post-war reconstruction, lies what was once referred to in coded documents as Unterkammer 12, Subchamber 12, a clandestine bunker designed not for defense, but for ritual experimentation. In 1940, as the tide of war began to shift, Himmler initiated what he called Die letzte Stiftung, the final foundation. It was meant to preserve the ideological core of the SS in the event of defeat. But this foundation wasn't a political doctrine or archive. It was a metaphysical contingency. According to recently unearthed documents in the Bundesarchiv, the Nazis had begun conducting psychic and ritualistic experiments with the goal of imprinting consciousness, memories, beliefs, even identity, onto physical spaces. They believed that the castle itself could become an eternal vessel for the Reich. Construction of the underground chamber began in early 1941 under the direction of SS Obergruppenführer Karl Maria Weiss, a figure absent from most war records, but mentioned in the personal correspondences of Himmler. Known internally as the Wewelsburg Protocol, this project converted a hidden crypt below the castle's north tower into a reinforced sanctuary designed to conduct consciousness fixation trials. The chamber was encased in basalt and obsidian, chosen for their so-called magnetic memory properties. Floors were etched with concentric circles, and a single stone slab, stained and cracked, sat at the center of the room. It was called Der Anker, the anchor. Eyewitness accounts from forced laborers later smuggled to the Allies described seeing strange processions of SS officers descending into the chamber at night, dressed not in uniforms but in ceremonial robes. Some carried books, others carried cages. No one who entered the chamber during those sessions was seen again for days, sometimes weeks. And when they returned, they were changed, glassy-eyed, silent, and unrecognizable even to their fellow officers. What little documentation survived reveals that the primary goal of the Wewelsburg Protocol was spirit anchoring. SS metaphysical scientists believed that the soul could be fractured and distributed across multiple locations or vessels. The chamber was designed to serve as a binding point, a psychic lodestone. Prisoners, most of them considered politically dangerous or ideologically tainted, were used as energy sources. Their final moments were meticulously timed with chants, symbols, and the burning of specific artifacts tied to Germanic folklore. This wasn't simply occultism, it was a mechanized ritual, engineered like a weapon. Among the artifacts recovered after the war was a manuscript, carbon-dated to the 1940s but written in archaic German. Titled Das Echo des Willens, the Echo of Will, it outlines procedures for what the Nazis believed would allow eternal ideological resurrection through quantum imprinting of consciousness. Scholars argue the text is a bizarre fusion of Norse mysticism, early quantum theory, and eugenics, claiming that through trauma and repetition, belief could become metaphysical law. In 1986, during a structural inspection of the castle, construction crews accidentally breached a sealed staircase hidden behind a false wall in the west wing. It led directly to Unterkammer 12. What they found was untouched by time, dustless, dry, and suffocatingly still. The anchor stone remained in the center, surrounded by skeletons laid out in perfect radial formation. Each skull was split down the middle, as though by precise blade work, though no weapons were present. A crude iron lectern stood at one end of the room, atop which was placed a wax cylinder recording. When played, the recording contained 18 minutes of low chanting in Old High German, interrupted only once, by a voice whispering, in perfect modern German, "We do not die. We only wait." Further investigation revealed that the walls of the chamber emitted low-level electromagnetic fields. Scientists brought in to study the space experienced extreme headaches, hallucinations, and sudden drops in body temperature. One technician claimed to see a silhouette in the mirror-like surface of the anchor stone, waving at him in reverse motion. The team was pulled out after 3 days. The most controversial incident occurred in 1992, when a private researcher and self-proclaimed Nazi occult specialist illegally entered the sealed chamber with a camera crew. Only fragments of their footage remain. The tape shows the group entering the chamber, their lights flickering rapidly. One member begins to speak in an unfamiliar dialect before collapsing. The camera falls, and for 20 seconds, the footage becomes distorted. When it clears, a single frame shows what appears to be the chamber, empty, except for the anchor stone, now glowing faintly red. The castle was closed to the public for nearly a decade following the break-in. It reopened in 2001 as a museum, but Unterkammer 12 was resealed with steel and concrete. Visitors are told the lower levels are structurally unsound, but guards occasionally report lights flickering near the north tower. One claims he heard chanting beneath his feet, though he was alone in the building. Another swears he saw a man in an SS uniform walk through the east corridor and vanish before turning a corner. There are theories that some modern extremist groups have tried to replicate the Wewelsburg Protocol. In 2017, authorities discovered a remote cabin in the Black Forest filled with ritual markings identical to those in Unterkammer 12. On the walls, written in dried blood, was a single phrase, Einer für alle für einen Geist. One for all for one spirit. To this day, the Wewelsburg Protocol remains one of the most secretive and disturbing chapters in the annals of Nazi experimentation. It was not about weapons, or medicine, or victory. It was about eternity, about turning a belief into a force of nature, about embedding a nightmare so deeply into the earth that it could awaken again, and again, long after its creators were gone. In the shadow of the Bavarian Alps, hidden among jagged cliffs and deep pine forests, lies a limestone mountain once known to the locals as Blutfels, Blood Rock. It was a name spoken in hushed tones long before the Second World War, tied to ancient folklore of pagan sacrifice and disappearances. But in 1943, the mountain became the site of one of the Nazi regime's most secretive and horrifying projects. Operation Blutfels, an initiative so classified that even within the SS, it was known only to a select few under direct orders from Reichsfuhrer Heinrich Himmler. The project was administered by the Ahnenerbe, the Nazi occult division, which sought to uncover and exploit the supposed mystical powers of ancient Germanic and Indo-European traditions. Most of their efforts were eccentric at best, archaeological expeditions, translations of forgotten runes, but Blutfels was something else entirely. It was not research. It was a laboratory, a ritual site, a vault. A natural cave system beneath the mountain was expanded by slave laborers brought from Dachau. Tunnels were dug in secret, and the entrances were hidden under camouflage netting, nestled between cliffs accessible only by narrow paths or air. According to recovered documents, the facility was known as KRA-13, and its primary purpose was the development of Blutbindungstechniken, blood-binding techniques. The goal, to bind ideological loyalty into the body itself. To make a soldier who could not betray, could not defect, could not forget. The experiments combined pseudoscientific procedures with ancient rites. Prisoners were injected with strange serums, often derived from animal blood, herbs, and fungal spores, then exposed to hours-long rituals involving rhythmic chanting, sigil exposure, and deprivation tanks filled with thick, metallic-smelling fluid. Those who survived were said to enter fugue states lasting days. When they emerged, they recited Germanic warrior oaths that had not been taught to them. What disturbed Allied investigators most, after discovering the site in late 1945, was not just the brutality of the experimentation, but its clear design. The rituals were mapped out in military precision. Psychological conditioning was blended with biology, theology, and acoustics. It was an attempt to create a human being whose body would reject ideological impurity, whose very blood would revolt against disobedience. The records found in the ruined laboratory detailed 6 successful subjects, all referred to only by number. Subject 4 had survived over 19 sessions and was said to respond to treasonous thoughts with intense seizures. Subject 2, allegedly a captured SS traitor, had been reconditioned and returned to service under a new identity, showing perfect alignment to command directives. But most chilling was Subject 6, whose entry ended with the phrase, Sprach mit der Stimme der Alten. spoke with the voice of the Old One. Who, or what, that Old One was remains unclear. Further exploration revealed a chamber unlike the others. A natural cave, smooth as glass, with a dais carved into the floor. Upon it sat an object no one expected, a black stone monolith, 3 meters tall, perfectly rectangular, pulsing with a dull, crimson hue. It bore no symbols, no seams. Just a single impression of a hand, human-sized, burned deep into the surface. American soldiers dubbed it the Red Idol. No one knew how it got there. It was not native to the mountain, and the Nazis had left no record of transporting it. Theories ranged from ancient pagan artifact to wartime hoax, but every person who touched it reported similar visions, endless hallways of bone, and whispers in a language no one recognized. Soon after the Red Idol was uncovered, the soldiers who had entered the chamber began to suffer strange afflictions: nosebleeds, sleepwalking, sudden bursts of violent speech. One officer, Lieutenant Charles Linda, awoke in the night and began reciting German military orders in perfect SS dialect. He had never spoken German before. Another, Private Saul Rosenberg, carved a rune into his chest, the same symbol found repeatedly in the ritual rooms, a jagged spiral within a circle, later identified as Wormkreis, the worm circle, associated with eternal cycles of obedience and sacrifice. The U.S. military immediately sealed the entire complex, classified it, covered it with explosives and rockfall. But rumors persisted. Locals continued to report distant chanting from within the mountains during winter nights. In 1968, a group of hikers vanished in the area. Only their clothes were found, neatly folded by a tree line. In 1995, a NATO satellite picked up an unexplained heat signature deep within the mountain, despite no volcanic or geothermal activity in the region. What Operation Blutfels revealed was a terrifying intersection of fanaticism and ambition, an attempt to overwrite the very biology of belief. The Nazis knew they were losing the war, yet they poured resources into this bunker, not to win the battle, but to ensure that the war would never end in their minds. That somewhere, somehow, their ideology would survive, not in books or films or flags, but in blood. In 2011, a private archaeologist, Dr. Hans Ruckner, claimed to have located the ruins of KRA-13. He published several articles hinting at an entrance sealed behind a landslide. A year later, he vanished. His apartment was found ransacked, his research hard drives wiped. All that remained was a single drawing taped to his mirror, the Wormkreis symbol, drawn in thick black ink. Beneath it were the words, "It still speaks." Whether Operation Blutfels succeeded or not depends on your definition of success. If the goal was to create a physically loyal Nazi soldier, the answer is no. But if the goal was to plant a seed, something more durable than flesh, more insidious than propaganda, then perhaps it did. Perhaps that seed is still buried, whispering from the dark, waiting for someone to find the Red Idol again, waiting for the blood to return. Every case adds a new layer of mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Which one lingers in your mind, and what's your take on what really happened?